First contact through fire. Deep in the Kuiper mining belt, Station K379 hung against the backdrop of endless stars, its reinforced hull barely visible in the dim light of the distant sun. The station's massive mining arrays extended like metal spiders' legs, designed to harvest rare elements from the asteroid field that surrounded it. But today, those arrays picked up something entirely different. Sarah Chen stood at the primary sensor console, her dark eyes fixed on readings that shouldn't exist. After 15 years as Chief Operations Officer of K379, she thought she'd seen every anomaly the belt could produce. She was wrong. "Mason," she called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Are you seeing this?" Dr. James Mason, the station's lead scientist, floated over in the low gravity, his silver hair forming a halo around his head. "Gravitational distortions that large shouldn't be possible out here," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. "The mass calculations are off the charts." Before either of them could theorize further, space itself seemed to tear open. Through the station's reinforced windows, they watched as a ship emerged, if you could call it a ship. The vessel was organic in appearance, its surface rippling like liquid mercury, desperately beautiful and completely alien. "All hands to stations," Sarah announced over the comm. "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." The crew of K379 responded with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, the station's modest defensive systems were online, though Sarah knew they would offer little protection against anything capable of manipulating gravity fields of that magnitude. The alien vessel was damaged. Even from a distance, they could see ruptures in its fluid surface, leaking what looked like luminescent gas into space. It was dying. "We're receiving a transmission," Mason reported, his fingers dancing across the console. It's like nothing I've ever seen. Multiple frequencies, layered data streams. Give me a minute to." He never finished his sentence. The transmission decoded itself, projecting directly into their minds. Images, emotions, and concepts flooded their consciousness. Sarah gasped as alien thoughts merged with her own. Help. Sanctuary. Pursuit. Death from the stars. The psychic contact was overwhelming, but not aggressive. These beings were desperate, terrified, and amazed to find life in what they considered a death zone. "They're shocked we can survive out here," Mason translated, his scientific curiosity overtaking his initial fear. "To them, this far from a star, with this much radiation, we shouldn't exist." Sarah made her decision. As humanity's first contact with an alien species, this wasn't technically her call to make. But with their nearest backup months away at best, and the aliens clearly in distress, she couldn't wait for committee approval. "Mason, prep the emergency dock. Engineering, I want containment fields and atmospheric adjustments ready for potentially non-humanoid life forms. Medical, stand by. Let's show them what human hospitality looks like." The docking procedure was unlike anything in their training. The alien ship seemed to meld with their airlock, creating its own seal. When the inner doors finally opened, Sarah and Mason led a small reception team, all wearing environmental suits as a precaution. The aliens emerged like living mercury, their bodies flowing and reshaping as they moved. They were beautiful in an unsettling way, their forms suggesting a level of biological engineering far beyond human understanding. 3 of them entered the station, their surfaces reflecting the emergency lights in rainbow patterns. Gratitude, amazement, fear still coming. The psychic communication was becoming clearer with proximity. The aliens were refugees, running from something that had already destroyed several of their worlds. They called themselves the Luminary, and they couldn't understand how humans survived in what they considered extremely hostile conditions. "What exactly are you running from?" Sarah asked, projecting her thoughts as clearly as she could. The answer came in a flood of terrifying images, vast crystalline structures moving between stars, absorbing energy on a solar scale, leaving dead systems in their wake. The luminaries' home star had been their latest target, and their civilization had barely managed to evacuate a fraction of their population. "We need to contact Earth immediately," Mason said, his face pale. "This isn't just first contact anymore. This is." The station's alarm system suddenly screamed to life. New gravitational distortions were forming, larger than the first. The luminaries' terror spiked so strongly that several human crew members staggered. "They follow. They hunger. They consume all." Sarah rushed back to the command center, the luminary flowing alongside her. The sensor displays showed multiple massive objects emerging from gravitational distortions, their crystalline surfaces refracting the distant sunlight like cosmic diamonds. They were beautiful, cold, and utterly alien, not like the luminaries' organic technology, but like something that had never been alive in any way humans would understand. "How many?" Sarah demanded. "5 primary structures," Mason reported, each one larger than Earth's moon. "They're moving directly toward us, consuming all energy they encounter. The asteroid belt." He paused, swallowing hard. "The asteroids are disintegrating as they pass. They're breaking down matter at the atomic level." Sarah looked at the luminary, their silver surfaces now dulled with fear. These beings had crossed space to escape extinction, only to find it following them to humanity's doorstep. But they had also found something they never expected, a species that thrived in conditions they found impossible, who built stations in the dark between stars, who looked at the deadly vacuum of space and saw opportunity. "Mason," Sarah said, her voice hardening with determination, "send everything we have to Earth. Full sensor data, first contact protocols, and a priority alert. The luminary found us because we survive where others can't. Now let's show them what else humans can do." The crystalline entities approached with inexorable purpose, their massive forms distorting space itself. But on station K379, humanity's first line of defense was already preparing for battle. They were about to demonstrate why Earth, a planet that most species would consider too hostile for intelligent life, had produced one of the most resourceful species in the galaxy. Sarah looked at her crew, then at their new allies. "Welcome to human space," she said, both out loud and in her thoughts. "Let's solve this problem together." The luminaries' response was a mixture of hope and disbelief. They had fled to the darkest parts of space, expecting to find only death. Instead, they found humans, a species that didn't just survive in the darkness, but had made it their home. And now, that darkness would become humanity's greatest advantage. The nature of the beast. 12 hours after first contact, Station K379 had transformed from a mining outpost into humanity's first interstellar crisis center. Sarah Chen hadn't slept, coordinating with Earth's hastily assembled First Contact Committee, while Dr. Mason worked with the luminary to understand their crystalline pursuers. The station's main laboratory had been converted into an impromptu research center. Holographic displays showed the approaching entities from every angle, their crystalline surfaces refracting light in ways that defied conventional physics. Mason stood before the largest display, his eyes red from lack of sleep, but burning with scientific curiosity. "You're saying they've always existed?" he asked the luminary representative, who had taken the human name Aurora. Her mercury-like form rippled with confirmation. "Always there. Stars die. Worlds end. Pattern repeats." The psychic communication was becoming easier to interpret, though the concepts sometimes stretched human understanding. Through shared memories, they learned that the crystalline entities were ancient beyond comprehension. The luminary civilization had first encountered them 10,000 years ago, and even then, they were considered a force of nature, unstoppable and eternal. Sarah watched the sensor feeds, tracking the entity's methodical approach. "They're not just consuming energy," she observed. "They're breaking down the fundamental forces holding matter together. But there's a pattern to it." Mason nodded excitedly. "That's what I've been trying to tell the committee. These aren't mindless forces of nature. Look at their formation, their coordination. There's intelligence behind their actions. No intelligence, only hunger. Aurora's surface swirled with patterns that they had learned indicated disagreement. Natural law. Cannot fight gravity. Why not? Sarah challenged, an idea forming. Humans fight gravity every day. We build stations in space, ships that cross the void, machines that harvest mountains. Just because something is natural doesn't mean it can't be understood and countered. The concept seemed to disturb Aurora. The luminary, for all their advanced technology, had a deeply ingrained belief in the immutability of cosmic forces. The crystalline entities were, to them, as unchangeable as the laws of physics themselves. But humans had a different perspective. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the station's chief engineer, burst into the lab with a tablet full of new data. "You need to see this," she said, her accent thickening with excitement. "We've been analyzing their energy absorption pattern. It's not random." She pulled up a complex diagram showing energy flows around the approaching entities. They're creating quantum tunnels, directing energy and matter through higher dimensions. But look at the resonance patterns. Mason's eyes widened as he studied the data. They're like crystals, real crystals. They have lattice structures, vibration patterns. He turned to Aurora. "Have you ever tried disrupting their crystalline structure?" "Cannot disrupt nature," Aurora insisted, but there was a new emotion in her psychic communication. Uncertainty. Sarah moved closer to the display, her mind racing. "Elena, what would happen if we hit those resonance patterns with opposing frequencies?" "In theory." Elena's fingers flew across her tablet. "Like hitting a wine glass with the right sound frequency, it could shatter. But the energy requirements would be enormous. We'd need a mining array," Sarah finished. "One designed to break down molecular bonds in asteroid minerals." She turned to Aurora. "Your people tried fighting them with weapons, right? Energy beams, explosives. Many attempts, many failures. But you never tried to match their fundamental frequency," Mason said, growing excited. "You saw them as an unstoppable force, so you never looked for their structural weaknesses." The luminary's surface rippled with complex patterns as Aurora processed this new perspective. Humans. Different. See patterns. Question nature. "That's because we evolved on a death world," Sarah explained, remembering the luminary's shock at human environmental tolerances. "Earth tried to kill us with gravity, radiation, extreme temperatures, natural disasters. We survived by understanding and manipulating natural forces, not just accepting them." The lab erupted into activity as they began modeling their theory. Elena's engineering team worked to modify the station's mining arrays while Mason and his scientists refined their understanding of the entity's crystalline structure. The luminary, seeing their natural law challenged for the first time in their history, contributed their vast knowledge of the entity's behavior patterns. As they worked, Sarah received an update from Earth. The full human response was mobilizing. Ships, weapons, and resources were being redirected to K-379. But they were days away at best. This first encounter would be fought with mining equipment and human ingenuity. "We need to test this on a smaller scale first," Elena said, looking at the modified mining array designs. "If we're wrong about the resonance patterns." "We're not wrong," Mason interrupted, his voice firm. "Look at these simulations. The math is solid. Their crystalline structure is their strength, but it's also their weakness. They've never encountered a species willing to analyze them as a problem to be solved, rather than a disaster to be fled." Sarah watched the massive entities growing larger on their screens. They were now close enough to see with the naked eye through the station's windows, vast, geometric shapes that seemed to drink in light itself. By all logic, a single mining station and a handful of refugees had no chance against such cosmic forces. But humans had never been very good at accepting impossible odds. "How long until the modifications are ready?" she asked Elena. 4 hours for the primary array. We'll only get one shot at this." Sarah nodded, then turned to Aurora. "Your people have run from them for thousands of years. Today, we're going to show you another way. Not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we never learned to accept that some things can't be beaten. Aurora's surface reflected the determination in Sarah's eyes. Humans teach new ways. That's right, Sarah smiled. Lesson 1. Everything has a weakness. You just have to be stubborn enough to find it. Outside the station, the crystalline entities continued their implacable approach, unaware that they were about to encounter something they had never faced in their eons of existence: human problem-solving. The hunt was about to become a battle. Test of theory. Time seemed to compress as Station K-379's crew raced against the approaching entities. In the main engineering bay, Elena Rodriguez's team worked frantically to modify the station's massive mining arrays, their tools floating in the low gravity as they reconfigured equipment never designed for combat. Resonance calibration complete on Array 1, Elena announced, her voice hoarse from hours of non-stop work. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the station's cooling systems. The power they were channeling through the mining equipment was pushing every system to its limits. The luminary had integrated themselves into the work seamlessly. Their fluid forms could reach into spaces too small for human hands, making adjustments with microscopic precision. Aurora herself had linked directly with the station's computers, her species' organic technology translating human engineering concepts into practical modifications. Energy patterns align, she communicated to the team. But power insufficient. We'll have enough power, Sarah assured her, though the calculations on her tablet showed their margins were razor thin. Mason, what's the status on those frequency models? In the adjacent laboratory, Mason hadn't moved from his workstation in hours. His holographic displays showed complex crystalline structures rotating in 3 dimensions, their resonance patterns mapped in pulsing colors. The entities aren't identical, he reported, manipulating the models with practiced gestures. Each one has slightly different crystalline formations. We'll need to tune the arrays individually for each target. Sarah studied the approaching threats through the reinforced viewport. The crystalline entities had slowed their approach, seeming to sense something different about this prey. Their vast surfaces shifted in impossible geometries, refracting the distant sunlight into colors human eyes were never meant to see. They're curious, Mason observed. They've never encountered anything that didn't immediately flee or fight conventionally. Elena emerged from inside an access panel, tools floating around her like metallic satellites. Array 2 is ready. We've got maybe 60% of normal mining power, but the resonance focusing should multiply the effect. Sarah nodded, her mind racing through calculations and contingencies. They had transformed their mining equipment into weapons, but not in the way most species would understand. Instead of trying to overpower the entities, they were attempting something far more precise, using the array's ability to break down molecular bonds to create destructive resonance patterns within the entity's crystalline structure. Time to intercept, she asked. 30 minutes at current speed, Mason replied. They're still consuming everything in their path. The outer asteroid field is just gone. Aurora's surface rippled with fear patterns. Always hunger. Never stop. Everything stops, Sarah said firmly. That's the second lesson about humans. We don't just survive, we change the rules of the game. The station's command center had been transformed into a battle bridge. Holographic displays showed power distributions, resonance patterns, and targeting solutions. Elena's engineering teams took their positions at the modified mining controls, while Mason's scientists monitored the crystalline entities' reactions. We'll target the smallest one first, Sarah decided. Elena, focus Array 1 on these coordinates. Mason, be ready to analyze every detail of its response. Aurora, we'll need your people to help channel power through your ship's systems to boost our output. The Luminary's organic vessel, still docked with the station, pulsed with internal light as they prepared to join their technology with human engineering. It was an unprecedented cooperation between species that had met just hours ago. 20 minutes to optimal range, Mason announced. The tension in the command center was palpable. Sarah opened a channel to the entire station. All hands, this is the chief. What we do in the next hour could change everything we know about the universe. These entities have terrorized other species for millennia because everyone saw them as forces of nature. But that ends today. Humans don't accept unstoppable forces. We study them, understand them, and find their weaknesses. Stay focused. Trust your training. Let's make history. The crystalline entities loomed larger in their views, their surfaces now clearly visible. They were beautiful in their alien geometries, but their presence seemed to distort reality itself, bending light and space around them. 15 minutes, Mason called out. Energy consumption patterns are shifting. They're assessing us. Elena's voice came from the engineering station. Array 1 at full power. Resonance pattern locked. Luminary ready, Aurora confirmed. Their ship's energy was now linked with the station's systems, organic and mechanical technology working in harmony. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Humanity's first contact with alien life had immediately become a battle for survival, but they were facing it in a uniquely human way, with innovation, adaptation, and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. 10 minutes to optimal range, Mason announced. The target is adjusting its approach vector. It senses something's different. Through the viewport, Sarah watched the smallest entity break formation, its crystalline surface refracting light in new patterns. It was the size of a small city, ancient beyond comprehension, and had never known defeat. That was about to change. All stations, prepare for first contact, Sarah commanded, allowing herself a grim smile at the irony of the phrase. Let's show the galaxy why humans are called Deathworlders. The real test was about to begin. Breaking the unbreakable. Target locked. Elena called out, her hand steadied on the modified mining controls despite hours of exhaustion. Resonance pattern aligned. The smallest of the crystalline entities had moved within range of Station K379's modified arrays, its surface catching the distant starlight like a diamond the size of a city. The other entities hung back, their alien geometry suggesting an almost curious observation. Power levels at maximum, Mason reported, his scientific detachment warring with obvious tension. Resonance mapping is holding steady. Sarah stood at the center of the command deck, surrounded by holographic displays showing power flows, targeting data, and the complex resonance patterns they hoped would prove their theory. Begin the sequence, she ordered. Aurora, channel your ship's power on my mark. The mining arrays, their original mineral-breaking purpose transformed into something never before attempted, hummed with building energy. The station's reinforced superstructure vibrated with the power being channeled through systems pushed far beyond their design limits. Warning, Aurora communicated, her mercury-like surface rippling with concerned patterns. Crystal responds. The target entity's surface had begun to shift, geometric patterns realigning as it sensed the building energy. It was adapting, just as it had adapted to countless attacks over millennia. But this was different. Not an attack on its impervious exterior, but an attempt to match its fundamental frequency. Now, Sarah commanded. Elena activated the modified arrays. Invisible beams of precisely tuned energy lanced out from the station, carrying resonance patterns calculated to match the entity's crystalline structure. Simultaneously, the luminary ship pulsed with organic light, channeling its power through the human technology in ways that defied conventional engineering. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The entity continued its implacable approach, its surface refracting the energy beams as it had refracted countless weapons before. Then Mason shouted, "Look at the diffraction patterns." Tiny distortions appeared in the entity's perfect geometry, barely visible at first. Like cracks in a mirror, they began to spread, the resonance pattern creating cascading disruptions in its crystalline structure. It's working. Elena breathed, her fingers dancing across controls to maintain the precise frequency. The internal structure is destabilizing. The entity's response was immediate and terrifying. Its surface rippled with impossible colors as it tried to adapt, to change its fundamental frequency. Energy readings spiked off their scales as it attempted to consume the attack itself. Power fluctuation. Elena warned. We're losing the resonance lock. Sarah turned to Aurora. Can your ship handle more power throughput? Dangerous, Aurora communicated, but her surface patterns showed determination. We'll try. The luminary vessel's glow intensified, its organic technology straining to channel more energy into the human arrays. The station groaned under the stress, warning alarms blaring from multiple systems. Structural integrity at 60%, Mason reported. We're pushing way beyond safety limits. Hold it together, Sarah ordered, watching the cascading effects of their attack. The cracks in the entity's surface were spreading faster now, its perfect geometry distorting as the resonance pattern forced its way through layers of crystalline structure that had existed for eons. Then, with a flash of light that momentarily blinded their sensors, the entity's surface shattered, not into pieces. Its structure was collapsing at the quantum level, the very forces that held it together being turned against it. Energy spike, Elena shouted. It's going critical. All hands, brace for impact. Sarah commanded. Aurora, divert all power to shields. The entity's death was like watching a star being born in reverse. Its vast crystalline surface imploded, collapsing in on itself as billions of years of consumed energy were released in an instant. The station's shields, reinforced by luminary technology, barely held against the shockwave. When their sensors cleared, where the ancient entity had been, there was now only a spreading cloud of crystalline dust, already beginning to disperse into the void of space. Impossible, Aurora communicated, her surface patterns showing shock and awe. Nature changed. The remaining entities had stopped their approach. For the first time in their ancient existence, they faced something new. Prey that could fight back. Prey that could win. Status report, Sarah called out, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they'd just achieved. Arrays at 30% power, Elena reported. We burned out most of the focusing crystals, but the basic systems are intact. We can rebuild them. All science teams, Mason added, download every byte of data. We just watched the impossible happen. I want to know exactly how we did it. Sarah studied the remaining entities on their displays. They had destroyed the smallest one, but 4 more remained, each many times larger. And now they would be ready, their crystalline structures already beginning to shift and adapt. They're learning, she observed. But so are we. She turned to Aurora. Your people spent millennia running from them because you saw them as forces of nature. We just proved they can be beaten. Humans different, Aurora communicated. See patterns. Make impossible. That's the third lesson about humans. Sarah smiled grimly. We don't just survive, we adapt. And we just changed the rules of the game. The remaining entities began to move again, their formations shifting into new patterns. They were ancient, powerful, and had never known defeat. But they were about to learn another human lesson. We learn from every victory, and we never stop improving. Elena, Sarah called out, how quickly can we modify the arrays with what we learned? Give me 3 hours, Elena replied, already moving toward engineering. You have 2, Sarah said, because I don't think our friends out there are going to wait much longer. The battle was far from over, but humanity had just done what countless civilizations had thought impossible. They had killed the unkillable. And they were just getting started. Round 2 was about to begin. Evolution of understanding. The vast emptiness of space around Station K379 was filled with crystalline dust, the remnants of what was once thought immortal. The remaining entities had pulled back to a defensive formation, their surfaces shifting in complex patterns that suggested something no one had ever seen before: uncertainty. They're communicating, Mason announced, studying the new sensor data. The energy patterns between them have completely changed. Sarah watched the entities through the command center's viewport, noting how their formations had evolved. They're not just ancient predators, she realized. They're intelligent, and maybe for the first time in their existence, they're afraid. Belena's voice crackled over the comm from engineering. Arrays 2 and 3 are reconfigured. We've adjusted the resonance patterns based on the first encounter. Aurora's people have done something incredible with the focusing crystals. You need to see this. In engineering, the luminary had transformed the damaged mining equipment using their organic technology. Where there had been burned-out crystals, there were now living lattices that pulsed with internal light, a perfect fusion of human engineering and luminary biology. Adapt together, Aurora communicated, her surface showing patterns of pride and excitement. Human knowledge, luminary life, make new. Just like the crystals we're fighting, Sarah mused. We're evolving too. She turned to Mason. What are the readings on the new arrays? Power output is triple what we had before, he reported, eyes wide at the data. The luminary biocrystals are amplifying the resonance patterns exponentially. But, he hesitated. What is it? The entities are changing their crystalline structure. They're learning, adapting. Each one is developing unique patterns, making it harder to target their resonance frequencies. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. Of course they are. They've survived for millions of years by adapting. But now, they're facing something they've never encountered. A prey species that adapts faster. The entities began to move again, but differently than before. Instead of their usual hunting pattern, they spread out in a complex formation that suggested tactical thinking. They were no longer simply consuming. They were planning. All stations, prepare for multiple targets, Sarah commanded. Elena, split power between the arrays. Mason, track their structural changes. Aurora, we'll need your people to help us adjust frequencies in real time. What followed was unlike any battle in human or luminary history. It wasn't fought with traditional weapons or tactics, but with frequencies, resonances, and the fundamental forces that held matter together. The entities would shift their crystalline patterns, and within minutes, the combined human luminary technology would adapt to match them. 2 more entities shattered under the precise assault, their ancient structures unable to adapt quickly enough to the rapidly evolving attack. But the remaining 2 had learned, their surfaces becoming more fluid, more organic, almost like the luminary themselves. They're trying to mimic your biology, Mason told Aurora. Fascination overtaking his exhaustion. They've never had to change this fundamentally before. Learn from death, Aurora observed. Like humans, the final phase of the battle pushed both species to their limits. The entities have become harder to target, their structures now shifting constantly. But with each failure, the humans and luminary learned, adjusted, and tried again. It was a race of adaptation, of evolution compressed into hours instead of eons. The station's combined arrays fired one last time, their energy supplemented by every bit of power both species could generate. The remaining entities, their surfaces now a strange hybrid of crystal and organic patterns, tried to absorb the attack as they had absorbed energy for millions of years. But they had changed too much, become too different from their original nature. The resonance patterns tore through their modified structures, shattering them not into dust, but into complex, fractal patterns that spiraled into space like frozen fireworks. When it was over, the sensor displays showed only empty space where the ancient hunters had been. Humanity's first contact with hostile alien life had ended not in destruction, but in transformation. Understanding achieved, Aurora communicated, her patterns showing deep reflection. Not just survival, evolution. That's the final lesson about humans, Sarah said, looking at her exhausted but proud crew. We don't just fight to survive. We fight to understand, to grow, to become something better. In the days that followed, the story of Station K-379 spread across the galaxy. Other species that had hidden from the crystalline entities emerged, eager to meet the humans who had done the impossible. The luminaries shared their experiences, showing how cooperation between species could overcome even the most ancient threats. The station became a symbol of a new era in galactic civilization. Humans and Luminary worked together to establish a research center there, studying the crystalline dust that remained. They discovered that the entities hadn't been destroyed so much as transformed, their ancient patterns broken down and reformed into something new. Maybe that's what they were looking for all along, Mason suggested, months later, as he and Aurora studied the evolving crystalline patterns in the laboratory. Not just energy, but change. Evolution. Sarah stood at her familiar viewport, watching ships from a dozen species dock at the station that had once been a simple mining outpost. Humanity had proven itself not just as warriors or survivors, but as problem solvers, adapters, and teachers. They had shown the galaxy that nothing was truly unchangeable, that even the most ancient forces could be understood and transformed. And in doing so, they had changed themselves, growing beyond their reputation as mere Deathworlders to become something more, pioneers of a new way of thinking about the universe itself. The age of isolation was over. The age of cooperation, adaptation, and shared evolution had begun.